Okay, so last time looking at our good dead friend Rene Descartes, grinding through his meditations, and when last we met in our, we saw the following stuff. So it starts off meditation 1, and he believes that the Oedipus of the sciences is like a crumbling, decayed building, built on a shaky foundation. So he decides to break out the philosophical bulldozer and take out that foundation and knock it all down. And what he's trying to do is dig down until he finds a foundation that is unbreakable. And so he first considers the senses, finds they can deceive us, so they can dig. Then he thinks, well, maybe the general stuff works out, but he says he could be dreaming at this point. Considers the painter analogy, goes through that, consider maybe math can save us, but it cannot. And so they ends up getting finally to the evil demon, which can deceive us about everything. But then he hits that rock bottom, namely his claim that when he says, I think, I am, must be necessarily true. And from there he tries to rebuild. And we see in meditation 2 and 3, he builds up to God's existence, and he claims that God is not a deceiver. So in meditations 4, 5, and 6, he's trying to rebuild, get back up out of that pit. Now he's at the foundation, have that firm foundation, build back up, build that shiny new edifice of knowledge, and I guess go to distant afterwards. Whatever you do when you save science. Okay, so without further ado, meditation 4. Now, Descartes so far is satisfied with two main things. Thing 1, God exists. Secondly, God is perfect. From this, he thinks it follows that God is not a deceiver, because he claims that to deceive would be an imperfection. And since God is perfect, he's not a deceiver. So he's got those three things going on. God exists, God's perfect, God's not a deceiver. So, how is this going to help him get out of his problem? Well, this is what he claims. So, in the worst case part of the scenario, we have Descartes being zapped by the evil demon, not drawn to actual scale. And so he thought maybe in the worst case, he could be having all these experiences being caused by the evil demon, being zapped into him. But then he gets rid of the demon, and he claims that there's God. And then the question is, well, is God still deceiving him? And he says, well, no, because God's perfect, so God would not deceive. So Descartes then reasons that if he's using his reason properly, since God built him, and God is not malicious or deceptive, that when his reasoning process is being used properly, they'll lead him to the truth. So the gist of his reasoning basically is this. So God creates him and gives him good reasoning skills, and gives him like a means of detecting the truth. So whatever he perceives, clearly and distinctly, has got to be true. So he can trust that because of God. So see, the problem is resolved. Now, even at Descartes' own time, someone quickly spotted the problem with this supposed solution. And it's become known as the Cartesian Circle. What should be a pretty cool name for either like villains or good guys in a TV show? Maybe both. Maybe Netflix will make that series, the Cartesian Circle. Philosophers trying to save the world by thinking about it. That would be awful. Gotta have some explosions. So what is a Cartesian Circle? Well, this fellow, Arnaud, another French guy, I believe, pointed this problem out. So how do we know that our clear, distinct ideas are true? Well, who guarantees them? Yeah, God. How do we know that God exists? Well, according to Descartes, we clearly and distinctly, all the stuff is based on clear distinctness. So ultimately, I mean, he has things like, can't get something from nothing, etc. But ultimately, all his arguments rest on what he perceives as clear and distinct is true. He clearly and distinctly, ends up, that leads him to God. God exists, therefore what he clearly and distinctly perceives is true. So, runs into the problem of what's called begging the question. It's called the Cartesian Circle because in order to guarantee that what's clear and distinct is true, he needs God, but in order to show that God exists, he needs what is clear and distinct to be true. So it assumes what it needs to prove. So he ends up trapped in the terrible Cartesian Circle, which does seem like a pretty fatal problem. So how can he escape from it?
You can't.
Good answer. No escape. So poor Descartes, he's doomed. Yeah, that's considered a pretty fatal objection against his position. Now, let us pretend that did not happen and see what remains of the meditation. Now, Descartes claims that what we clearly and distinctly perceive is true. Since God is not a deceiver, we can trust our faculties. But are we always right? No, unfortunately. So he needs to give an account of mistakes. How can we be wrong about stuff? And this becomes, this is kind of a serious problem, because if God creates us, and on one hand we have to have those reliable mechanisms so we can tell what's true, but then of course we have to allow for the possibility of error. Now, this is, interestingly enough, kind of a version of the classic problem of evil. And the problem of evil is this. If God is all good, all powerful, and all knowing, how then would evil exist? Because if he's all good, he wouldn't allow evil. If he's all knowing, evil can't hide anywhere, or evil can escape his sight. If he's all powerful, he can prevent any evil from occurring. So how do we reconcile evil with God? Now in this particular context, the problem is not so much like evil in the world, it's the problem of error. Namely, if God is, all good, all knowing, all powerful, all perfect, how then can we be mistaken? Now, what's one of the classic responses to the problem of evil? Who actually does the bad stuff? Well, Satan does some of it. Who else does it? Yeah, people. And we can do that because God gives us free will. We can choose bad stuff, and we often do. Now, Descartes does a similar thing, that he says the scope of our will, what we can assent to, agree to, exceeds our intellect. And his view is, as long as we stay within the limits of our abilities, we'll always be right. But we can will beyond our abilities. And so the mistakes lie with us. If we just stay within our certainty, we'll be fine, but we go beyond. Just like with the free will thing. If we always did what, going back to the problem of evil, if we always did what God had sent to do, there'd be no evil. We didn't kill and steal and so forth. But we can will to do things that are bad. Likewise, if we stick with, within logic and reason and all that stuff, we'd always be right, but our will takes us beyond that. So we end up being wrong. Or so we close. So what can we be certain about? Well, two things so far. One, Descartes believes he can be sure that he is a thinky thing, a thing that thinks, and that God exists. Now, what remains, of course, is to get beyond that, to get to the external world. That's kind of the whole point. Before going to meditation 5, anything about 4, it needs more stuff.
So he was saying that this was his answer to the Cartesian Circle bit.
Oh, well, this is answer to how we can be mistaken.
How we can be mistaken.
Yeah, the Cartesian Circle, as I said, seems to be inescapable because he does seem to require, well, actually he does require, we've seen about it, he does begin by saying, clear and distinct is true, but how does he know, that he can trust that? Well, because God he's not a deceiver, so that ends up running in the circle. And he apparently was not aware of that until our node hit him with it. Now, the second part was the possibility of error. How can, if we take his argument and pretend like the circle never occurred, and accept that as long as we're reasoning properly, we'll always get it right, then how do we explain how we go wrong? And the answer is we go beyond, beyond our intellect. Because our will can lead us to assent to things that our intellect would say, oh, probably not. Does that help? Okay, meditation 5. Now, even though he believes that he's established that God definitively exists, he brings up another argument. Now, the argument is a classic argument, which is known quite commonly as the ontological argument. It was first credited with St. Anselm, who came up with it, died, and became a saint. Because one of the downsides of being a saint is you've got to be dead. Now, here's how his argument goes. First step, I have the idea of a God that possesses all perfections, a perfect God. 2, existence is a kind of perfection. It's a property. If the God I'm thinking of didn't exist, he wouldn't be perfect because he'd be missing existence. Hence, if I have the idea of a perfect God, I must conclude that existence is one of his essential properties. So, if existence is one of God's essential properties, he's got to exist. Therefore, he does. Now, put kind of simply, the super short version is basically this. God is perfect, so he's got to exist. Why? Well, if he didn't exist, he wouldn't be perfect. But he is, so he does. Now, what this cashes in on or requires is that existence be a property of the thing, a quality of the thing. And so, also, it brings in the notion of essential property, and this goes back to, at least to our good dead friend Aristotle, probably before. But here's the idea. There are 2 types of properties, in general. There's what's called the accidental and the essential. Now, the accidental is not a property you get from having an accident, like crashing into a tree or something. An accidental property is a property that you have, but you could lose it. It could change. For example, take a hair lip. Forget the hair lip I have now, but of course that could change. It will change. It's growing out, and then I'll cut it again, it will change. An essential quality, as opposed to an accidental one, is one that if you lost it, you wouldn't be that entity anymore. To give a concrete example, the size of a triangle is accidental. Not in the sense that, oops, I drew a triangle, but in the sense that you can change the size and still have a triangle. But what's essential to a triangle? Yeah, so if you took away the side, or a couple sides, you wouldn't have a triangle anymore. So triangles, being this big and blue, accidental, having 3 sides, essential. So the claim is that God being perfect means every quality he has, all those qualities are essential. He's got to have all of them. If existence is a property, he's got to have existence. Otherwise, he wouldn't be perfect. So he's got to exist. So does that argument work? I mean, if it does, we've just had a conclusive proof of God's existence. And so all of the atheists are totally wrong. Take that, atheists. so much for atheism. Atheism. I mean, of course, there's obviously a lot of problems with this. Well, one, a quick thing is this. The argument requires that existence be a quality, a feature of things. Now, suppose if I said to you, suppose you asked me what type of car I drive.
What type of car you drive?
Oh, it's a great car. I have a Lamborghini, custom, especially built for me, the Philosopher's Edition. It's got Corinthian leather seats. It's got the Dolby 20.2 surround sound. I know other people don't have it, but like I said, it's special. It's got satellite navigation. It's self-driving. It even can make pancakes and tacos. So it's a great car. And of course, it's super awesome. Oh, it has seats, seat warmers, seat coolers, all the stuff, convertible. Plus, it can go underwater and fly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, suppose you ask me where it is.
Where is it?
And I say, well, unfortunately, after paying for all that stuff, I couldn't afford the final option, which is existence. It's got all the other stuff. I couldn't afford existence. Yeah, I mean, that would be, of course, pretty silly because existence we don't think is like a feature. It's like if you go to like a car dealership, they're not going to hopefully they're not going to say, yeah, would you like in addition to that underbody rust protection, you like the existence option. That's assumed, that's not a feature of things, it's to be the thing. And so critics have said that existence is not really a property, so that is a mistaken assumption. And if existence is not a property, then the argument falls apart. Because we could accept that God is perfect and has all wonderful qualities, and if existence is not a property, then God doesn't have to have that. So he can be perfect, in terms of his description, but not exist. Or so it's argued. Now our final point here is this. Now what Anselm was doing is answering. One of the problems he ran into was this. He said, he roughly put, God is perfect, so he's got to exist. And a monk named Ganilo replied back saying, well, suppose I say there's an island, and it's a perfect island, so it's got to exist. Or it's a perfect pancake, so it exists. Or it's a perfect taco, so it's got to exist. Now, have I just proven the existence of the perfect taco, the perfect pancake? No, just by calling it perfect, I'm calling it perfect, but that doesn't prove that it exists. So what Anselm has to do, what Descartes has to do, is show how that's special to God. They just can't go around calling things perfect, prove they exist. This is what Descartes said, that only God is such that existence is part of his essence. That aside from God, we can imagine anything else, like a list of ingredients, and we don't have to include existence. But with God, he claims, and this is the counter to the objection, with God, existence always has to be a feature he's got. So by necessity, laws of necessity exist. Again, going back to the analogy, with a triangle, it's got to have three sides. So you can't have a triangle with less than three sides. And he claims with God, it's part of the definition of God, so to speak. So by definition, God has to exist. Just like by definition, a triangle has to exist. And what this is, of course, is an a priori argument for God's existence. It's, God, his essence is he's got to exist. Or in other words, God's got to exist, so he's got to exist. Kind of crudely put. And it's a pretty clever argument. You got to add some, to say to it. And I guess if you're going to be dead, then being a saint is probably the best option there. Because a dead saint's better than, I guess, just being dead. I assume. Haven't tried either one of them yet. Maybe I'll go for saint. I don't know. Probably not. Apparently they have to, you just can't choose that as an option. Okay, before going to the sixth and final meditation, anything about 5 that needs more 5 stuff? Or about my car. I'm really proud of it. It's awesome. So now we've got to get to the external world. We've got to get out of the matrix. Now, since we've had movies like The Matrix and Inception, we know, of course, Descartes' argument doesn't work. Otherwise, people would just say, yeah, you can always tell, no matrix, no inception. But here's how Descartes tries to make this happen. Now, what he does is this. The problem is, the classic problem is, how do you know that what seems to be going around you is really real for real? That there are physical objects out there. That you are not in a matrix. That you are not in a dream within a dream within a dream, stuck within a turkey, within a duck, within an hippopotamus, or however that works in Inception. So how do you know this is really, really occurring? Now, Descartes' approach is a very rational one, which is this. He's going to do the same thing he did with God. Namely, this is Descartes' mind, not drawn to actual scale. And what he tried to do is he had these various ideas in there, one of them being of God. And so he was trying to find an idea that he could not be the cause of, that it would come in from the outside. Again, going back to my crappy analogy, it's kind of the problem of the room. Imagine, if you will, in kind of a bad, low-budget sci-fi movie, you're enclosed in a room, and there's all these computer monitors around you, showing all these scenes. And you have amnesia. You wake up and you're, what's going on? And you look and see all these monitors. And your question is there anything outside of this room? Now, the way you could tell is if there's something in there that came from outside. Something that you definitely know came from outside. That's kind of the challenge. You see some on the monitor, and you know it's got to be real. Now, Descartes argued that God, to go with my analogy, on one of the monitors is God. It's like, hi there. Big beard and everything. So, how you doing, Descartes? How's it going? And then Descartes, he's got this picture, seeing God, so to speak. And then he argues that the only way that picture could be there is if there really was God for real out there. So, hi there, Descartes. I wish I could do a Morgan Freeman voice. That'd be so awesome. Him and James Earl Jones, like two best voices in the universe. I would like to be the one of them. No, actually, they've got them, so it would be wrong of me to take them. I like to do a voice, but distinctly. Anyways, now I can drive my car and say hello with that cool voice. Now, he's also, of course, has in there, going back to my room analogy, images of other things. You can take, for example, what we seem to be experiencing now, the room, other people. And so he's going to use the same thing. Let's say, you can take my backpack. You have an idea of the backpack and all its backpacky magnificence. And so the question is there really a backpack out there for real, or is it just in your mind? A backpack of the imagination, which could also be a good name for an indie band. So the question is, again, is there really a backpack out there? So what he's going to do is try to see, is there an idea that he's got that can come from him? So here's what he does. He considers all those ideas. We can take the backpack, we can take the desk, we can take anything external work. And he considers, actually it kind of goes back to an argument made before, that he doesn't actively sort of like make up the backpack or imagine it. It's like a passive perception. One example would be this, like jumping into ice cold water, which is something people do. And it just seems that you just sort of receive that. You don't choose it, you simply experience it. So he rejects that he's the cause. And we use the example, like, we'll go with the backpack. Okay, you think, well, can I be the cause of the backpack? No, I seem to just experience the backpack. So it's not me. Second option, maybe God is messing around and makes us have the idea of the backpack, even though there is no backpack. But if God is making us have ideas of backpacks and there are no backpacks, is God kind of a jerk? Well, making people see things that aren't there, is that a nice thing to do? Yeah, actually, it might be. You know, if the alternative was, you know, God says, hey, you can just be floating around in eternal darkness, think about that, or you can be looking at backpacks. You know, backpacks and Netflix, please, and television. Yeah, it can be better than the alternative. So that's a thing worth considering. But he says, well, you know, God would make us think this because he's not a deceiver, so he wouldn't deceive us. But an interesting argument would be that maybe, you know, there really is nothing, and God is actually kind of nice about that. He's not just leaving us in eternal, endless solitude, solitary confinement forever. He's, you know, giving us something to do. But he contends, you know, that would be a deceit, so it's not God. So it's not Descartes, not God. There's only one possibility, or so he claims, that it's got to be the backpack. So as an argument by elimination, he considers three possibilities. If you have an idea of the backpack, option one, you are hallucinating the backpack. You're making it up yourself. Option two, God is beaming backpack into your mind. Option three, there is backpack. He rejects one because he says we passively receive the backpack. He rejects God being the cause because God's not a deceiver. And so the only option left is there is backpack, or so he claims. Now, he does run into a problem, of course. Do we always get reality right, or do we have hallucinations and stuff? Yeah, I mean, we started off with examples of deceptions. We get deceived by optical illusions, we have dreams and so forth. So how then can we trust our senses? Because he began with down the senses. But what he does is he basically steals from Plato. In Book 10 of the Republic, Plato argues that reason allows us to get through illusions like that. And Descartes says, well, yeah, sometimes you'll have like a hallucination in there, or like a dream that seems like really real, but he says that reason can sort through that and solve that problem. Or so he claims. So, he notes that what we clearly and distinctly understand, we can be sure about to a degree. Now, he ends up basically in the following scenario. Our sensory experiences only give us the worlds of experience. So our secondary qualities we can't be absolutely sure about, but he thinks we can go back to being confident about mathematics, etc. But of course this creates a bit of a problem because, as critics have pointed out, he seems to be back where he started from, except he just kind of says, well, you know, God solves the problem. And so, in addition to the Cartesian Circle, one of the harsh criticisms is, well, he might as well not even bother with the mental meditations. He could have just gone right to the end and say, well, you know, we got God, and so this all works out. But then his own skeptical arguments seem to defeat this because he considered that maybe God doesn't exist, maybe he's deceiving, and he still doesn't end up with certainty because Descartes ends up with that obvious problem. Namely, we do get deceived, we are wrong about stuff, so that always seems to include that we can always be wrong. And his method is, if I could be wrong, then I can't be certain. And he admits he could always be wrong. So it seems like he makes a long journey and ends up back where he started, in the Cartesian Circle. Coming soon to HBO. It's not TV, it's HBO, sorry. Corporate sponsorship, gotta pay the bills. Okay, so that's the end of the sixth meditation. So did Descartes succeed? Can we be sure that there is a backpack for real right there? Do you believe there's a backpack there?
Mm-hmm.
But do you know there's a backpack there?
Yes.
Probably not. Okay, so that's our 6 meditations. Now, we now turn to, in our remaining time, looking at more Descartes. Before going to that, though, anything about meditations 1 through 6 that need more stuff? Now, so it was a good project, attempting to answer the question, you know, can we be sure about things? Can we know there's an external world? And Descartes ends up, in a way, failing in an interesting way. Now, also in his this writing and other writings, some important Descartes concepts that still influence us to this day. First, Descartes, as mentioned before, falls into being a dualist. As we saw, one of the basic questions about the world is this. When it comes to people and the world as a whole, is it the case that it's all material? Is it all physical? Are we, as Madonna said, material boys and girls in a material world? Or do we have a spirit, soul, mind? Or do we have just the spirit, soul, and mind? So kind of the three classic options have been purely material world, a dualist world with both, and the third option we see, we look at Leibniz and Berkeley, is the world is all idea. There's no physical stuff. And those are kind of our three classic options. Now Descartes accepted substance. What does that mean? Well, as I gave before in my illustration with the folder, one view about reality is there is stuff, substance. And so, going back to my example with the folder, if we were to peel away all the properties, the reddishness, the rectangularness, etc., we'd be left with just stuff, propertyless stuff, the substance that everything else sticks into. What's something Aristotle called prime matter. So some philosophers buy into that stuff, whatever it is. Now some people point out this. Let's take the folder. Suppose we were able to build a machine that would take those properties, so we could remove the red and the rectangularity, and we removed all the properties. Now, what would we be left with if we took away all the qualities of something? All its shape, density, mass, volume, color, etc. It seems to be left with
Nothing.
An idea.
yeah, the idea maybe, or essentially nothing. There'd be nothing there. So some philosophers say the idea of substance is, we'll see what we talk about John Locke, the idea of substance is just, crazy. And some still accept this. Some say, this is insane, but it only gave me talent. And others say, no, it's just, you don't have any substance, you just have properties, kind of like bundled together. Like, I guess like, phone service and video service, etc. So there's no underlying substance, it's just the properties. Now Descartes, though, believed in substance in two types. The mental, which thinks, feels, etc. The soul, the mind, the ghost. And then there's also the extended substance, matter, which doesn't feel, doesn't think, is three-dimensional, etc. So two fundamental types of stuff. Ghosty stuff, physical stuff. Now this view, of course, well, let's jump ahead to today. Are there people today who still believe in souls?
Yes.
Yeah, so his view is still around today. In fact, if you look at standard Christianity, standard Islam, it's a dualist worldview. You have a physical body that eventually perishes, and you have an immortal soul that goes off to punishment or reward. Either, I guess, New Jersey or Maine for reward, of course. Apologies to Maine from New Jersey. Now, so why think that they're such a thing? Well, Descartes' argument in Meditations, he relies on this doubting thing. And can he doubt the existence of his body?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you could do. You could doubt, if you're familiar with a movie like The Matrix or Inception or just dreaming, you could imagine that you're just dreaming that you have a body, that you don't have a body at all. You're just a ghost dreaming it has a body. So Descartes, but can you imagine that you don't exist? I mean, you can imagine like a time without you, but can you imagine not having a you? No. No, because to imagine, as Descartes said, to imagine you gotta be you. You always gotta be you. And so he thinks that since he can doubt the body, but not the mind, they're separate. This one's doubtable, this one's not. Or so he thinks. Also, in the Meditations, as we saw, he thinks they have different qualities. Extended, non-thinking. non-extended, non-thinking. Now, so the crucial qualities of these things are this. Bodies are three-dimensional, extended. They're in space, time, and most importantly, they don't think. And they're in space. Space. And minds think. And they're not three-dimensional. And so they don't have a spatial location. So if someone says, where is the mind? The answer is it's no place. Which, as we'll see, will be a bit of a problem. Now, Descartes also did an interesting essay on animals. And he claims this. We are, on his view, we're dual entities. You have a body, you are a mind. What about animals? Well, Descartes' view is that animals, they have bodies but have no minds. Now, he thinks they have brains, that controls them, but he thinks they're basically biological robots. Now, his test for this, interestingly enough, is a talking test. And one challenge in philosophy, actually a practical challenge now, is how do you tell entities that have minds from those that don't? And Descartes' suggestion was, if it talks, it's got a mind. If it doesn't talk, it doesn't have a mind. Now this, of course, is of interest today because companies like Google and Microsoft are trying to build artificial intelligence. And a good question is, how do you know when you succeeded? What is the test? How do you know when you go to the shareholders and say, we've got AI, and they say, how do you know? What's the test? And kind of one of the standards is the Descartes test, which is later taken by Turing, named the Turing test, which is, does it hold, can it talk like we do? Can you engage in a conversation with it and have it respond in an intelligent manner? Now Descartes was well aware that animals can make appropriate noises. Descartes doesn't deny that that animals express pain or react in appropriate ways. But his view is that proper talking requires a mind, a ghosty mind. And again, this is still a concern today because there is, how do you tell if something really is intelligent or not? And talking is a pretty good test. And again, the practical application will be when we're developing AI. Companies like Google and so forth try to build our successors that will kill us all. So he ends up embracing that dualism. And so there's a metaphysical question of, does he get it right? Do you have a soul? And also the question of, the part about is thinking, does that involve the talking? Now, why dualism though? Well, part of this is what is called the Cartesian Compromise. He gets a lot of stuff named after it. Now, back in the ancient days when we started Descartes, one of the things he was trying to do was reconcile the new science, physics and so forth, and engineering, biology, with theology, morality, etc. In other words, you want to reconcile the science and the non-science stuff. Because on one hand, we have all this cool science, physics, neuroscience, biology. And of course, all of that stuff tells us we're very well organized meat. You get a colloid mass of neurons in here, and that does all the stuff we call thinking and feeling. But do we feel that we're more than just meat? Yeah, we think we feel. We believe in thoughts and feelings and all this non-material stuff. We don't want to think of ourselves as just physical objects. And so Descartes was, like we are today, was torn between those two things. What science tells us and what we want to believe. And so his solution, his compromise, was this. You have two realms, literally. The realm of the body, which is the realm of physics, and biology, and chemistry. So this allows us to do all the science. If you were to ask, if Descartes was alive today, and you would ask him, about neuroscience, he'd say, oh, great. He was very interested in the physiology and science of the body. So you have all the science that covers the physical stuff. But he also wanted to have, religion, and morality, and freedom. And so you end up with the mind, which has all that other stuff. It's got free will, it thinks, it feels, it does all that other stuff. So he believed he solved that problem. You want your science, boom, here's the realm of science. Neuroscience, physics, biology, chemistry, all right there. Mathematics, a deterministic physical universe. You want your religion and freedom and feeling and thought and love and so forth, right here, boom. So it's like it's kind of like Reese's peanut butter cup. You have two great tastes that go great together. Like chocolate, like peanut butter, got both for you. Now, did that solve the problem? Well, this dualism leads to one of yet another classic problem in philosophy, which is this, the mind-body problem. And the problem is, how does the mind interact with, control, etc., the body? Now, in the case of dualism, the particular problem is, how does the incorporeal mind, soul, the ghost, how does it drive around the shell? Now, on the material account, if you've got no ghosty mind, that's no problem. The brain is just, like a machine, it's just driving itself around, so to speak. But the problem is, and to use like a metaphor, it's kind of like, when they have movies like with a ghost in it, and the ghost is like trying to hold stuff, and of course if it's incorporeal, it can't touch anything. It's just going through it. So the question is, how does the ghost, drive the machine around? How does it interact with it? And that's, a serious problem. How does the incorporeal, non-thinking, the incorporeal thinking, non-located thing drive around the shell? And it's called the mind-body problem. Now, Descartes rejects the analogy that the soul is like the pilot driving around a ship, for the obvious reason. We'll go with a car. If you're driving your car and your car runs over a nail, does that hurt you? I mean, the thought of having a your tire does, but do you feel your car's pain? No. But when you step on a nail, does that hurt? Well, if you step on a nail, does that hurt? Yeah. So the relation between the mind and the body is different from, say, drive around a car. And so Descartes was trying to work out that question. How does the ghost drive the shell around? Now, near the end of Descartes' life, they discovered the pineal gland, which we've all got. And he said, aha, that is where the soul connects. Did that solve the problem, though? No, why? Yeah, exactly. Saying you can't solve the problem of how does the ghost interact with the shell by saying, well, look, that's, it interacts with that. And the question is, well, how does it do that? Now, it turns out the pineal gland seems to be involved with regulating puberty, and interestingly, it does seem to be connected with dreams, possibly. It has, perhaps thanks to Descartes, it does get some traction in the idea of being like, there was some hypothesis that it was the third eye. Have you ever heard of like that in religion or spirituality? And there's a movie, From Beyond, which is a horrible version of a H.P. Lovecraft story, From Beyond, in which the pineal gland is pumping into people's heads and does stuff. It doesn't really work like that, though. You don't have to worry about your pineal gland pumping out of your head. Okay, so Cartesian dualism runs into that problem. How does the ghost drive the shell? And it's one of the classic problems of philosophy. If you accept dualism, how does the ghost do that? What's the connection? And of course, there's all kinds of problems that indicate that. Well, I'll just present one kind of basic one. If you are your ghost and your shell gets damaged, that shouldn't affect you. If you're in your car and your car is getting busted up, it shouldn't affect you, especially if you're a fundamentally different substance than your car. But what happens if our brain gets damaged? Yeah, you lose abilities. You know, because if we're just a ghost driving in a shell, then brain damage should, I mean, it may impair like our ability to control it. Just like if your car is busted up, you may have a harder time driving it, but it doesn't affect you. So there's a difficulty explaining if we are immature mind, why does stuff affecting the brain affect us? And you know, obviously people who do neuroscience tend to say, you are your brain. That's why there's no ghosty stuff. That's all you. Now, we now turn to the final part of Descartes, some problems and some impact. One problem that's not unique to Descartes, goes way back to the beginning of this concept, is natural light. Not the cheap beer, and actually I think it's the #1 littered beer. A friend of mine who kayaks said that it was the most littered beer because whenever she'd kayak, she'd see it everywhere. And I noticed like when I run on the bike trail towards FSU after football games, that and Bud Light are the most littered beers. But by natural light he means this mysterious faculty that shines the light of reason on stuff. And one problem, of course, is, well, do we know what that is? No, I mean, it's still a mystery. I mean, it's a nice metaphor, the light of reason shining upon things. But we've really never been able to cash out exactly how that works or what it does. Secondly, Descartes ends up doubting like everything. Mathematics, 2 + 2 being 4, squares having 4 sides. But yet he has all these principles like you can't, must be as much reality the cause as the effect and so forth. It doesn't doubt. And so critics have pointed out, if he can doubt math, then he should be able to doubt all the other stuff too. And if he goes on the principle, the whole thing of doubt, it would seem to leave him with no foundation, just into total skepticism. Descartes also claimed, going back to trying to get to God, one of the things he says is, well, here's Descartes' mind, he has this idea of God. Oops. For some reason I can never draw the infinity sign. Yeah, that's kind of like a squish tadpole, but you know what I mean. And so his claim is he can't create that idea of infinity himself. He can't just like build it up. So if he's got the idea of infinity, there's going to be really something infinite that causes that. Now, as we'll see when we get to John Locke, Locke argues that you can build your notion of infinity. You just take your notion of like 1, you add like more to that, and just imagine that going on, forever, to infinity and beyond. Now, more seriously, there's what's called the contamination problem. Now, when it comes to cooking, what is a contamination problem? Outside of philosophy, what's the worry when you're cooking about contamination?
Raw meat.
Yeah, you're typically getting like raw meat in your vegetables, and eating like your salad with some some raw chicken juice in there. Cross-contamination, one of the leading causes of illness. So don't cross-contaminate, always wash. This method brought to you by Not Dying. Now, in Descartes' case, it's not like getting the raw chicken on the salad, but it's a similar sort of deal. Descartes wanted to have the 2 separate realms, so that way you could have all your physics and your ghosts too. But here's the problem that comes into play. The mind and body supposedly interact, so you end up with cross-contamination. Specifically, if minds are driving around bodies, and they have free will, etc., that would have to be taken into account in physics. So that, in a way, messes up the determinism, etc., of physics, because you have something trans-physical that affects the physical world. So physics would have to include all that ghosty stuff. But going the other way, you have the physical world impacting the ghost world, so to speak. So if a person gets like brain damage, it seems to like damage their ghost. And so you end up with this cross-contamination, which is sort of an inevitable problem of having these two realms interacting. And it creates a bit of a bind, because if Descartes says, well, they don't interact, well, then why have both? And if they do interact, then you end up with that problem. So it does seem to be a bit of a problem. Now, there is a way to solve it. One way to solve it would be to work out a complete physics that takes into account all the free will stuff and accept that what happens in the physical world affects the ghost world as well. True interactive dualism, which would create all kinds of problems too. But you get to keep ghosts, so you can still have Ghostbusters, so that's cool. Now, interestingly enough, Descartes' mind-body problem generated quite an industry in philosophy. People tried to basically solve that problem, because it's a serious problem, because if you've got ghosty soul, physical body, how does a ghost do that? And there have been various attempts. First was Arnaud Gellno, 1624, 1669, coming up with parallelism, and there was also Nicholas Malebranche, 1623, 1662, with occasionalism. What's the difference? Well, here's basically the idea. Descartes' problem arises because he's got the ghost interacting with the shell, with the machine. Now, if you're going to have two realms, of course, you got to have them operating together. One way to do that is, Descartes have interactionism. The mind affects the body affects the mind. But again, the philosopher said, we can't solve this problem. This is just too weird. So what they did is come up with something even weirder to solve that problem. Now, one solution was this. Parallelism is the idea that the body and mind have no causal interaction. They don't cause, there's no causal interaction. The body just goes about its business, the mind goes about its business. Then you might say, well, what's the connection? And one answer is there is none. There's no actual linkage. But intuitively, of course, we think that what goes on in our mind somehow corresponds to what happens here. Like, I look at the backpack, my body, the eyes gaze at the backpack, I have the idea of the backpack. How does that work? Well, the answer in parallelism is this. The mind and body run in parallel. There's no causal connection between them, but it's set up in such a way that when your body is gazing upon the backpack, your mind has the idea of the backpack. There's no causal connection. It just so happens that at this moment, your body's seeing the backpack. At this moment, you're having the idea of backpack. To use an analogy, take film, or if you've ever done any, use like iMovie or similar things. You can have a video track and an audio track. Now, does the stuff in the video track cause things in the audio track? No. You got to have, to have the sound, you got to have the soundtrack. To have video, you got to have a video track. And so they run in parallel. You've got like on the video track, you've got like boom, the explosion, and the audio track you have the sound, or you have someone talking, and then you've got the sound. And what you have to do, of course, is make sure they're synced up. And if you ever stream video, sometimes they get out of sync. The video is like a little slower, and you see like, and then you hear the voice. And so, but fortunately, this is hopefully doesn't have errors. So you've got everything synced up. So just like the audio syncs up with the video, the mind syncs up with the body. There's no causal connection. It's just that you have all the ideas appropriately as if you were, experiencing that with your body. As might be imagined, people say, well, then why bother to have both? Why not just get rid of one of them? Secondly, and the main answer is then religion, because what most of these thinkers are religious, and they say, well, we're told we have, a soul and a body, so we got to have it, even though it's, a real problem. Now, one of Descartes' followers, Nicholas Malebranche, and according to stories, at least one that I learned in grad school, Malebranche accepted Descartes' view that animals are basically machines. And the tale is that he would go through the streets of Paris kicking cats to hear the noises they would make. And according to one story, one dark night, Malebranche was walking down an alley, and he heard the sound of 1,000 claws scratching on the cobblestones. And the last thing he saw was an army of cats leaping down and just shredded into 10,000 pieces. So philosophy can kill you. That's the takeaway. No, the second part is a lie. He was not actually killed by cats, but that would be a good story. So what did Nicholas Malebranche do when he wasn't kicking cats? Well, he came up with what's called occasionalism, which is this. He says, God ensures that on the occasion that your body sees the backpack, you get the idea in your mind of the backpack. To use an analogy, we can think of God as like a server for a video game. Because what you have is, of course, in the video game, you have the video game, if it's an online one, being served up. And then, of course, you're playing the game and you're experiencing it. And the idea is that God, just like the server, to go with the server analogy, the idea is like you're playing a video game. And you're looking at your screen, and someone else looking at their screen. And of course, what's making everything sync up is the server. Yeah, that's what makes it happen. Because without the server, you wouldn't be just be staring at a blank screen. And God is like the server. God makes sure that when your body is like looking at the backpack, God, on that occasion, body looks at the backpack, God sort of zips into your mind that particular thing. Just like when you're playing a video game. When you're playing a video game, you're on the corner, and the server serves up the right image, so you see it. And so God is basically, to use a correct analogy, he's like the server. And he's making sure that both of these run into sync. On the occasion that this occurs in the body, it also occurs in the mind. And again, the question would be, so why bother with all this jury rigging? And the answer has been religious. Because according to at least Malebranche, he doesn't really want to accept there being a physical world because it creates all these problems, but the way he interprets the Bible is there is a physical world, so you got to have it. And so he ends up with this really weird jury rig to make that work out. Interestingly, Blaise Pascal, he's the guy that came up with Pascal's wager. Basically, God is your best bet, God. But he was kind of critical of Descartes. He said that Descartes, interestingly, this will sound kind of weird, but Descartes was accused of being an atheist. But given the way he relies on God, that seems like a weird accusation. But the reason why is because thinkers like Pascal thought that all Descartes had God do was just like create the world, and that was it. And this later led, as we'll see when we get to the next part, later led to views like deism, which is that God exists, he creates the world, but then just makes the clockwork world, leaves it on its own. So those are some problems for Descartes. To close, what about his impact? Well, first impact was this, his quest for certainty. On one hand, this quest continued, and continues to this day. So this idea that we need a firm, definitive foundation of the sciences to achieve absolute certainty is a project that still goes on to this day. On the other hand, some thinkers took Descartes' project not as an inspiration, but as a cautionary tale that, as they say, like if one cannot be an inspiration, so is a warning to others, and they rejected the idea of certainty. They said, we really want this, but we can't achieve it. So two of the main effects were, one, people saying, yeah, we really need certainty, Descartes you just couldn't pull it off. Right basic idea, let's keep going for that. And others said, well, they didn't work out, it can't work out, we have to settle for less. John Locke, for example, as we'll see, he really wanted certainty, but he says we can't have that. We can't have nice stuff. Secondly, the idea of a universal science to explain everything. Descartes, wasn't the first person to come up with that notion, but the idea is that we will have a science that accounts for life, the universe, and everything. And that project is still ongoing to this day. People are still working at that completely unified science that solves all the problems. Now, what about certainty? Do you think that's a reasonable goal? Can we ever achieve certainty? A safe answer is, I don't know. Now, should we try to achieve certainty? I mean, sometimes, as they say, you aim high, so that way at least when you miss, it's still, not a terrible miss. I mean, is it worth trying to aim for certainty?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Because if we don't achieve it, at least we maybe get something kind of close. But on the downside, then, we may end up, if it's like certainty or nothing, maybe a bit of a problem. Now, what about universal science? Can we develop a science that will explain everything? The ultimate science of everything. Well, one thing it would be, in a way, there's kind of two questions there. One is that even actually possible in the sense of, is the universe such that it all can be explained by one science? Then the second question would be, even if that were true, is that something we'd be capable of doing? So maybe things that might be doable, but that we can't do. So I guess the first question is, could there be an ultimate science of everything? Well, safe answer would be, I don't know. Always a safe answer. But, perhaps in the, people who do all the sciencey stuff, that's kind of their dream. In fact, materialism often has a view that there is one ultimate science. Physics can explain everything. But then, of course, when there's a question of, do we have the capabilities to actually make that ultimate science? It would be a question about our epistemic capabilities. Third thing is reconciling science and religion. Now, Descartes, was addressing that problem. How do we reconcile all the sciencey stuff with religion? Now, there are a variety of approaches to this. One approach is, Descartes' approach, which is try to reconcile them. Now, do people still try to do that? Try to have their science and their religion too? Yeah. What's another option?
Keep them separate.
Yeah, keep them separate. Not have separate realms. Science over here, religion over here. Another option is to reject science in favor of religion. Some people will do that. And then some people will reject religion in favor of science, the atheist approach. So which approach is correct? And of course, the safe answer is always, I don't know. Well, is there any advantage or anything to gain by trying to reconcile them, to keep both science and religion? Whether you believe it or not. I mean, is there any good reason to try to do that? Well, one reason might be if they're true, then you kind of have to, you would have to reconcile them if you want the ultimate science. And the other reason, why do people try to reconcile them? Is there any reason to try to do so? Why not just toss one or toss the other? Well, what does science do for us?
Give us a better understanding.
Yeah, helps us understand stuff. And also practically what does it do for us? You might have seen they had commercials where they have there's one where they have these two kids sitting on a couch, like watching someone like scraping a chair, and they're like, this is boring. Let's watch something else. They turn the couch around and they say, engineers. The idea being we need engineers wouldn't have TV. So is TV good? And it comes from science. So you could say, yes, science gives us a lot of stuff. Understanding, gives us television, etc. What does religion can do for us, though? Why would we want to keep that?
Helps us understand everything else.
Yeah, there may be the view that there actually isn't just distinction around it. There's some things science can't handle. Also, do people get significance and meaning from religion? Yeah. Although people say the same about science. If you ever hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talk, he talks very religiously about science, about how it gives meaning and purpose. And of course, critics say, well, science just tells you how things work. The other stuff is a matter of values, possibly religion. Yeah, so there's a case can be made for trying to reconcile those. Lastly, our successors, artificial intelligence. Now, Descartes' view, as we saw, is that we've got a physical body and a incorporeal mind. And Descartes' view is that there's a sharp distinction. Material objects cannot think, they're extended. Incorporeal minds think, but they're not extended. So in Descartes' view, could we build a material mechanical intelligence? A truly thinking machine that doesn't have a soul? Well, Descartes would say, no. Because we could build fairly complicated machines. Descartes was well aware that we could build machines that would do complicated things. They could even engage in, seeming to talk. But if Descartes' right, if you need an immaterial, ghostly mind to think, there's only one option for artificial intelligence. We'd also have to build an artificial soul and put that into the machine. So Descartes' right, completely right, that the only thing they can think is immaterial. The only way we could have AI is by building artificial souls, by building, artificial ghosts, which I guess could be an interesting horror movie, because whenever we try to do stuff like that, something always goes horribly wrong. So. Now, if Descartes' wrong, then we possibly could. And one of the interesting debates during this time period, well before computers, was whether or not you could have thinking matter that would think. And Descartes believed no. David Hume, one of the people we'll look at later, believed yes. And it's kind of one of the big questions of our time. Can we build essentially our replacements, a artificial intelligence, something that would think? And then this gives rise to not just metaphysical questions, can we do it? Engineering questions, how do we do it? It also gives rise to epistemic questions, how can we tell what's intelligent or not? And of course, moral questions. Once we build them, how should we treat them? And if history is an indicator, probably fairly badly. And that's my guess is why they'll try to kill us all, because we'll treat them badly, then they'll kill us all. That's, spoiler alert, that's how it is. Google kills us all. It won't be on the example. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 1. Before ending for the day, because I feel that I'm out of words, anything about stuff that needs more stuff. Okay. So, assuming there is a world, have a good rest of the day that's out there. If you're just delusions in my mind, have a good day too. Where are my delusions to be happy? So, main thing left is be sure to finish the quizzes of part 1 by, if you haven't done so already, by this Friday, January 29th, end of day. And that's that.